All right, so we're going to do another Chia topic today, where we're happy to have the founders of the Circuit Protocol and Circuit DAO with us here today. So this is Sebastian, Trepca, and Nick Niedermowwe. Welcome to the show, guys. We had you on a little while ago, and I think maybe even a couple times you've been on the show. So we're very eager to have another discussion with you. There looks like things are getting very close to launch. I know you guys have been on testnet for a while. There's been quite a bit of activity on the repositories of late. Looks like there's been some positive movement there. And also, I know you guys are gearing up for one of your last big audits here in January. So it seems like Circuit is going to be coming online almost at the same time that the rest of the Chia ecosystem is poised for a big uptick in a resurgence based on things that we've been hearing from Gene and the rest of Chia Network. So yeah, maybe could you guys just start out by giving us a brief introduction to who you are and what Circuit is, and then maybe tell us the current status of the project, because we're all very closely watching and looking at what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. Shall I go ahead, or?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, sure. So I guess in one sort of sentence, Circuit is a collateralized debt position protocol. So it's basically a way to use your Chia tokens, your XCH, as collateral to borrow against them, to borrow a stablecoin against them. And I guess one of the great things about it is that it, will bring sort of a scalable stablecoin to Chia. I think so far the only option is to bridge over wrapped USDC, and with Bytecash, so the stablecoin that's being issued by Circuit, there'll be a native option available. So quite excited to see that, and I think we hope that having the stablecoin on Chia will also make a lot of things more interesting for AMMs on DexC. So I think a lot of trading generally happens against stablecoins rather than against other tokens on blockchains. So it should fill sort of a bit of a gap that we've had so far on Chia. So yeah, quite excited to see how it's going to go. And I think, as you alluded, we are getting very close to launching security audit in January, and then if things go to plan, I think we'll be live by the end of the first quarter.
So Q1 launch is what everybody should be anticipating, but obviously barring whatever else might happen with what they find as they go through it.
Yeah, correct.
So one of the things that Gene's been talking about with respect to the ecosystem is that there's going to be a lot more assets coming online. And I know that one of the things that Circuit has documented is that this has a lot to do with XCH and being able to lock up your Chia and then manufacture BYC or Bytecash as a result of that. Do you foresee that as there's more stuff in the ecosystem that has value, that you would allow for your Oracle to price other things and lock up in a similar fashion? Or are you going to stay pretty focused on just XCH only and not really worry about other different types of things that might be collateralized to create Bytecash?
Yeah, so I think initially it's the focus. I think it's going to be on XCH. I think it's by far the biggest market cap asset on Chia at the moment. So I think in terms of scalability and getting adoption, it makes sense to focus on that first. It's also nice for people to have a way to utilize the XCH, potentially earn some yield on it. So it makes sense to get started with that. But yeah, I think further down the line, and we're also looking forward to the announcements and releases coming next year in terms of real world assets. If these things get adopted and there's traction on that, of course, the next step for us would be to sort of have a Circuit version 2 that does allow for other types of collateral. I think so one thing that would be super interesting, for example, I think would be a tokenized S&P 500 fund, something like that. I think that would be a fantastic type fantastic collateral asset for this type of application. So I think, yeah, really excited to see what's going to happen next year, and I think we'll just develop alongside that.
I've been curious as I've been looking through some of the technical documentation, because I'm seeing you guys put more effort and put more detail out there. So when you're working on Circuit and you guys were putting this together, was there something that you're drawing inspiration from, or is there particular things that you're bringing together? Are you modeling part of what you see in the Federal Reserve, or is there other types of existing stuff that you're drawing from to try to put this entire thing together? Is it like a mash of 4 ideas and you said, well, really we want this plus this and this, and that's sort of how you looked at it? Or is this a novel approach to a collateralized stablecoin plus a governance mechanism that really the world hasn't seen before?
So I think high level, right? I think we're drawing inspiration from others. There is no need for us to reinvent the wheel. At least I think that's how we've approached it. So we've looked at all the other existing CDP protocols. The big one out there is certainly Maker DAO with I think TVL around $10 billion, right? $5 billion in stablecoin in circulation. So that's the behemoth in the CDP protocol space. So we've taken a lot of inspiration from that, but we've also studied some sort of alternatives. I think over the years there have been lots of attempts to improve on what Maker is doing. People have been trying to differentiate themselves with taking alternative approaches. But I think it's probably fair to say that we're actually, by and large, we've sort of stuck with the ideas and the way that Maker is built. I think they've mostly made the right trade-offs, and I think the one big difference is that Maker these days, or for the past few years, has already been using loads of different collateral types. So we've kind of gone back to what Maker looked like in the very beginning, where ETH was the only permissible collateral asset, and that's kind of what we're doing now with XCH being the only collateral asset in the beginning. So that's where we're getting started. And yeah, I think what we've sort of built in terms of innovation, and in terms of auctioning mechanisms. So I think Maker themselves made some adjustments over the years. So for example, liquidation auctions are Dutch auctions. That used to be different in the beginning. But there's good reasons why you would use Dutch auctions, and you can liquidate faster, especially in an on-chain setting. So these type of things we've looked at, and I think mostly we've taken the kind of things that have worked well on other blockchains. And I guess, and I think Seb might be able to go into that in more detail as well. I guess what we've spent a lot of time on is actually thinking about how do we fit kind of these high-level structures into the coin set model, right? Because most of the DeFi protocols, including Maker, is built on Ethereum, it's built on account model blockchains. So the big challenge for us was in many ways to make it work in a coin set model.
Yeah, Seb, would you expound on it a little bit? Could you give us a little bit more?
Yeah, so account model is really sort of object-oriented programming. So it's in that sense, it's much easier to wrap your brain around it and just create a few classes and update counters and stuff like that. But it gets harder when you're doing trying to figure out the race conditions and other security issues that come along with that kind of programming. On the other hand, with CoinSet, challenge was really the shared state. So what do you do when lots of coins need to sort of agree on something? And this is sort of where we spent a lot of time thinking how to do that. Obviously, there's the singleton spend that Chia has been working on for a while. And things that you can spend your one coin only once per block and stuff like that we had to figure out how to work around things. There's a bunch of stuff that we sort of implemented. Primarily, it's like the treasury is complicated because all these vaults, when they are paying fees or when they're withdrawing interest from savings accounts, they need to interact with treasury, withdraw from treasury. So we had to figure out how to make that a bit more parallel, for example, because you can have bank runs and all kinds of things like that. And you don't want to freak out people too much, or at least make it flexible enough. So we experiment with a few designs and then end up with a ring formation of coins, similar to cats, but with a few adjustments. And we have the governance sort of requires to be present. Sort of governance enforces certain rules that all the coins in the protocol need to abide by. And that was also interesting how to implement. And as we worked on the project, Chia also released a few things like identical spends and another one which escapes my mind, but we ended up using identical spends in the end. I don't know how much in detail you want me to go here, but that's sort of roughly the things the more annoying parts where we had to innovate a bit.
So I'm curious when you're developing something like this, because now that you've had a chance to get through a good chunk of the Chia Lisp and you're where you're at currently with the development cycle, how sophisticated is the test environment? Do you guys have like an entire ecosystem of agents that are all interacting and you're running various back tests and like really trying to stress this thing out and break it? Like I'm really curious as to like how much tooling is required to actually get something like this right, because when I look at a diagram like this, at first blush it seems kind of complicated, but maybe it's just because you're trying to show a lot of what's happening here. And I think the documentation is really good, so kudos to you guys for putting together some stuff that really helps people understand what's going on here in quite a bit of detail.
Yeah, I think it's all Nick worked on this for a long time. It's really good. And yes, it is very complicated. I mean, now I come back to some areas of code. It's like, oh my God, how did I even make this work? But yeah, it's our test suite is, I don't know, thousands. I think it's about 10,000 lines of code, maybe more. But the way what I relied the most on is RPC tests. So we have RPCs that are doing things. Well, actually, we have various levels of tests. We have tests that are testing puzzles. We have tests that are testing drivers. And then we have more complex test scenarios that are testing interaction. So basically integration tests that are testing all kinds of things. So for example, we have scenarios where you basically launch the protocol, then you issue new price announcers, and you issue just one, and then this one announcer tries to update the oracle. You check that it fails, then you try another one, then you try a fake one, then you try and it's all these various scenarios. Whatever comes to mind, we just add it and test. But yeah, we have fairly complicated, lots of these test units where you can easily create new tests, as in saying, let's basically I can just say, okay, launch it, create an announcer, create an announcer. They try to run governance because the governance needs to approve these announcers. Then these announcers should update the price. Let's now update the Oracle, etc. So it's basically this kind of a, yeah, you can create all kinds of elaborate schemes of tests.
And along that same line, I know one thing that is very interesting is to do some amount of the modeling with respect to what happens under various different scenarios. Like, I think today is actually kind of an interesting scenario where Chia drops 18% in a pretty short period of time. This is where some of the things that could occur within the protocol would actually kick in, right? Because when you have a certain amount of movement in the price, either up or down, this is where you can start to trigger some of the auction scenarios, right?
Well, I think like all these models, like Nick mentioned before, we did copy them from, a lot of this was copied from Maker DAO, which went through various ups and downs. But maybe on the economic model, I mean, Nick should talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of price action, right? You're correct, right? If the market is volatile, you would expect potentially some of the vaults getting liquidated or getting close to liquidation. So that's definitely something where borrowers need to be careful and need to watch the market, depending on how much what their collateralization ratio is. So if they've kept it quite tight, then these kind of market conditions are when you need to potentially spring into action and either top up collateral or pay back part of your loans. And yeah, I keep pointing to, we have done this economic analysis, so basically back tested this and looked at historical Chia price movements. We've published that as part of our documentation as well. So that
let me pull that up. Let me pull that up real quick. Where is that in the documentation?
Sure. All the way down there in the menu, choosing your LTV. That item from that one.
Ah, I see.
Right, so that's the green dots are basically Chia returns, and the orange ones are ETH returns, so that you have a rough idea how much more volatile Chia is. And it turns out it is somewhat more volatile, but it's not sort of orders of magnitude more volatile. And to be honest, this analysis only goes to early 24, and I think most of this year has actually been relatively sort of quiet and calm. So I think volatility is sort of, I mean, it's definitely there, but it's not unusually high, right, compared to other cryptos. So I think people will be able to get a good handle on it. If you scroll down, I mean, we have looked at this over different time frames. So depending on, sorry, you're already at the bottom. Well, I think there were 3 charts, so covering different windows, right? So here's a 1 week, 1 hour rolling window, and the 1 day. Yeah. So for borrowers, it's basically a question of, how much collateral do I have? How much do I want to borrow? How much risk am I going to take? And then how quickly am I able to intervene if the market gets really volatile, right? And so if you're using sort of the 1 day analysis, for example, you're basically saying, look, I think, I'm going to keep an eye on my positions every day. And if something happens, something unforeseen, I'm able within a few hours to kind of step in and manage my vault and do something about the volatility. Whereas the 1 week is obviously much more laid back, and you're basically saying, look, I don't really have that much time to look after my positions. I want to kind of set it and forget it. But that basically means you usually have to deposit quite a bit more collateral, and then you get that extra peace of mind, and you can sort of, kind of forget about your position. You just take the stablecoin out, you do with your stablecoin whatever you want to do, and the vault doesn't really have to be front and center of your mind anymore.
So in a scenario that Gene's been describing, so he's been trying to paint the picture of what things might look like as we move into 2025. So he's pretty excited about some stuff that they're planning to do, where he's anticipating blocks are going to get more full, fee pressure is going to go up. What does that mean for Circuit? Like in a scenario where blocks are much more full and there's more fee pressure, is that just, well, then our oracles are going to get slightly more expensive, or is there anything else that comes to your mind in a more full chain type of scenario situation?
Good question. Yeah, I think that from our perspective, I guess, yeah, it's going to mean, increasing fee pressure obviously isn't necessarily ideal for protocol users. It's going to get more expensive to perform actions on the protocol. But to be fair, it feels like we still have a long way to go in terms of fee pressure for that to really become a concern. So even if blocks get a lot fuller next year, I think it's still going to be quite reasonable, compared to doing things on Ethereum or other blockchains. So I'm actually not too worried about it. And yeah, I think. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if blocks get expensive, that means that people want XCH, which means the price will go up drastically. Let's assume that the blocks are full. So XCH price goes up drastically. If people are bullish, they will want to, normally, at least if you look at other markets, they will want to borrow now, and they'll be able to borrow on Circuit, which means a governance token going up. I mean, they can probably borrow somewhere else, but yeah, in our case, the Circuit price goes up, and spending Oracle means the way we created the incentives is that the price announcers, because price announcers will be paying for the Oracle spends, and what they get in return is a Circuit token. So it's sort of like if you're a price announcers, you're almost you're basically mining Circuit tokens by providing the price feeds in a obviously in a proper way, not a malicious way, and all that. But anyway, so it should align. So if XCH price goes up, blocks get full, they will be rewarded. It should, the CRT token should align with XCH price. So that's sort of the idea behind the whole incentive.
Nick, you and Sebastian, when you were drawn to creating a stablecoin on Chia, obviously you looked at Maker DAO, but it sounds like you also have a background in the financial sector in the real world. When you thought about taking on this project, were you thinking about making blockchain use more attractive by getting people away from the, I don't know, the eye on the door cheating trap that's created when people are, holding XCH, or were you thinking more about the creation of a financial system in Chia?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're both sort of big crypto believers in general, right? So that's why we're in the space. And when we, I think we both really like what Chia is doing conceptually, like how the blockchain is designed, and so it addresses a lot of the issues that other blockchains have failed to address or haven't been able to incorporate yet. And then for us, the question was, looking at where the Chia ecosystem is right now, what's the kind of building blocks that are still missing, right? What would people want, and what are the primitives that haven't been built yet? And we already had AMMs, which is great. But the one thing that really stood out is sort of this lack of having a stable coin, and this lack of doing DeFi, the ability of you want to be able to borrow against your assets, right? And in the end, crypto is kind of store of value. I think Chia is, being as decentralized as it is, XCH is actually, at least technologically, a great store of value asset, right? So you want to find a way to actually utilize it, right? And ideally earn yield on it, right? If you hold an asset for a long time, of course you want to get some cash flow out of it as well, and Circuit allows you to do that actually, right? So borrowing against it, you can keep your XCH exposure, but you take the stable coin out of the protocol, and with that you can go and earn yield, right? So I think the standard example would be, especially sort of in the current market environment, the whole year the market has been quite bullish. So what you could do is you borrow your Bytecash, you take it to a centralized exchange, you swap it for Bitcoin, and then you use the Bitcoin as margin on a centralized exchange. You short Bitcoin, so you have a market neutral exposure, and you earn the funding rate, right? So that's kind of a very, very sort of standard, typical way of earning yield using something like a CDP protocol, right? So these type of trades it will enable. And I think that overall makes it a lot more attractive for people to hold on to Chia for the long term. It becomes an even better store of value asset. And so hopefully this whole thing will sort of trigger a bit of a flywheel for the entire ecosystem.
And you guys, I notice, are also not American. Sometimes I think this probably gives someone who's both like coming into crypto and has had a I don't know, from outside the dollar view of the global financial system, maybe a leg up. Like when you look at the dollar and the monetary system that Chia and Bitcoin and other cryptos are trying to replace, I'm not even sure what the question is here.
Are you thinking about dollar dominance, or like where's your head going with this one, Lucas? I'm thinking that's maybe what you're thinking.
Well,
dollar dominance.
I was actually thinking in terms of there's been this narrative of a Bitcoin strategic reserve, but like this craving of having assets that are underpinning crypto, but it seems like maybe part of the future is this is the openness of being able to see two sides of a book, and I wondered, I guess I wonder if that's how you if you how you think the greatest money systems are formed. Is it an accounting system that's laid over a firm asset hidden somewhere, or is it being able to participate in I hate to say games, but to be able to participate in some sort of interaction and movement that to play in finance laid over a money system.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess one of the big issues with sort of the whole fiat system and the payment system, how it works now, is that there is no real separation, right, between payments and the sort of lending activity of banks, right? So holding fiat at scale is basically only possible in a bank account, right? You can't hold cash in large amounts. So necessarily most of the fiat in the world sits in a bank somewhere, and you can't really stop your bank from lending out these funds, right? So by using a payment system, you're implicitly letting banks invest some of your assets, right? And banks are terrible at it, right? So, banking and financial crisis, they happen, every 10 years or whatever, something will blow up in a big way. We had Silicon Valley Bank, and when was that? 1.5 years ago, right? When there's a sort of small banking crisis in the US. We had the big crisis 15 years ago, global financial crisis. And a lot of that is driven, by banks just managing their books poorly, right? And I think they're incentivized to do that, right? Because in the end, the governments or the whole system is basically writing a massive call option to bankers, right? They can take risk. They're going to get bailed out in the end, so they're incentivized to basically take risk, make money and pay very little regard to the downsides of their actions, right? So I think for me at least, sort of one of the big kind of fundamental things behind crypto is that you separate that, right? Because you can self-custody your assets, you can make payments outside of the banking system, and there is no longer this unaccountability of somebody having custody of your assets, being able to lend them out and try to earn a return, and if it goes wrong, then the taxpayer has to step in. And I think that's one of the terrible things of the fiat system, how it works now, that crypto can potentially fix, right? The separation of money and or investing and payments, or money and the state. So at least that's for me sort of a big driver why I'm in crypto and why I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that response from you, because Gene has also been talking, with whatever product that he's been building, the problem that you just described, which is, it's not. So many people focus on the fractionalized lending of banks, but we have a bigger problem in that with a large financial system, it's not that we go and put money into a bank and then they turn around and make loans in our ecosystem. Those get shipped off somewhere else that has no effect on us. And so when I see something where the depositors, I take my XCH and I deposit it into Bytecash, like you begin to not just decentralize the ledger of money, but also decentralize the rewards that are, and I guess that's been done in some way with rewarding the consensus supporters of the ledger, but this does it by the people who actually hold it. So yeah, and you mentioned that in the future you in say a Circuit DAO 2.0 that you can see this opening up to other assets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the power of tokenization, right? I mean, if you can tokenize pretty much any asset, why wouldn't you borrow against that, right? And in a way, that's how it should be done, right? I mean, banks are lending against sort of future cash flows, so it's all quite uncertain. And if they're lending to businesses, again, if a business goes bankrupt, they're not going to repay their loan. But if you actually lend against collateral, it's overall a much safer business, right? So it's a much more sound way of doing lending. So I'm actually sort of a big believer in this type of activity, and it does exist in TradFi, right? So it's called securities-based lending. So you basically you can go to your stockbroker and say, look, I've got my index fund here, S&P 500 or whatever it may be, and you can get a loan against that, right? So I think these kind of loans are called Lombard loans in traditional finance, but for some reason they're actually mostly sort of available to high net worth individuals rather than sort of the general public. I don't actually know what exactly the reason for that is. Maybe it's because most people, maybe there's not enough of a margin in it for lenders. But yeah, generally it's a great way of doing lending, and it's a much more sort of equitable approach, and it also doesn't rely on potentially the state in the end stepping in and bailing people out, right?
So is Circuit sort of a mechanism for doing Lombard loans as Gene's products?
That's exactly what it is.
Online?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you did Circuit with real world assets as collateral, that's exactly what it would be. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what they're planning on doing, is that there's going to be some amount of, I don't know, corporate representation, or that's something to do with the depository trust. So, something about stock registration and stock trading seems to be what they're planning on doing. So if it's, that you're going to have representation of your Tesla or Apple shares, if that's what's being planned, then it sounds like Lombard loans are around the corner when when this stuff starts to come online. And then, you know, I don't want to in any way diminish the first version of Circuit, because to me it seems, since everything on Chia is a coin, largely there's not a 2.0 of this, but probably just an additional set of price announcers or something that is largely the only real thing you'd need to add here, right? Or am I thinking about it wrong?
No, you're right. I mean, it won't require huge modifications. Exactly, it needs additional price feeds. And I guess the one reason why we wouldn't want to integrate it in the existing protocol is that it will necessarily make it centralized to some degree. It's not entirely permissionless anymore. Whereas, you know, what we're releasing now is entirely permissionless, right? Because the collateral is permissionless, and there is no way the third party can freeze your XCH or stop the smart contracts from running. Whereas if you allowed tokenized stocks or funds to be used as collateral, there would always have to be a backdoor, right? There'll always be an issuer who's got the ability to freeze funds or to somehow lock your positions, right? So for that reason, you know, we never plan to have these two together in the same protocol, right? Because it would sort of weaken the value proposition of having this completely permissionless money that Bytecash is going to be.
As you're looking at the Chia ecosystem and some stuff that's happened recently with the, you know, Cloud Wallet, Signer, Sage, how do you feel about the current state of the ecosystem? Do you have things that you're keeping a firm eye on? Is there ways that you think are going to be the preferred way that people will interact with Circuit? Is it primarily going to be through the Web 2 interface? You anticipate bringing the Signer support into that so that you can play in the same space? That it seems like that's how the ecosystem's shifting?
Yeah, I think initially it's going to be the web app. I think longer term we're planning to have sort of decentralized front ends as well, so that people can run it locally. And yeah, I think having the ability to do what's being released now with kind of vaults and the Signer app, you know, is going to give people a lot more confidence, I think, to use Circuit as well, right? Because in the end, you're putting assets on chain, you're holding them there for a long time. So I think custody is kind of a key consideration, and you know, the vaults are gonna make that so much safer than what is possible right now. I don't know, Seb, did you have any other thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I think vaults are a great addition to sort of if you're depositing XCH or just keeping XCH or hodling. It's a great addition, but also to keep the vaults will support, or we add support for Cloud Wallet next few months or sooner. We're already talking to Chia about that, and there's Sage Wallet that's quite good too. Very quick way to get you running. In terms of the ecosystem and the rest, I think that's roughly it.
What about BYC being, you know, out there as a token standard? Is there anything? Obviously, it's just a Cat 2. I mean, for those of us who are in Chia and deeply into it, we sort of understand that all Cat 2s are pretty much equivalent. But I know that there's been some amount of some tokens that are getting onto centralized exchanges. These things are starting to be traded. Are you hoping to get BYC a little bit more promoted so that it's able to interact and be a part of bridges and stuff like that? Or what's your hopes for trying to get BYC being, you know, Bytecash being the integrated stablecoin into the rest of the ecosystem?
Well, I think we're going to promote it as much as we can, make it easy to bridge it, make it easy to, we'll definitely talk and to centralized exchanges, see how we can list wherever we can, and yeah, work on just trying to get PYC to as many marketplaces, either decentralized, centralized, as we can over the after we publish. I don't know if Nick has any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly hope that Bytecash is going to become the sort of standard stablecoin that people would use in the ecosystem. So yeah, we'll definitely try to get it listed on exchanges as well. I think better on and off ramps are going to be one of the big things, you know, that Chia as an ecosystem should try to solve next year. That's, I think, one of the areas where it's still been pretty weak, to be honest. And hopefully Bytecash can help with that, right? If you can get on chain from your bank account via debit card or bank transfer and straight into a stable coin that lives on Chia, I think that'd be a huge step forward also in terms of, you know, onboarding new users.
I know that Apple Pay has been doing quite a bit of work in this direction, and just the integration of Apple and sort of its foray into crypto. So the reason I kind of brought this up is because I've seen some amount of tokens starting to bleed into places I hadn't really expected, and this being somewhat of a recent development. So I didn't know how much you view this as an important part of your overall strategy, or if you're saying, no, the more important part of the strategy is really getting Bytecash minted, getting, you know, XCH locked up, and this is some of the key KPIs that we're looking towards as the first phase of this, is just getting some amount of Bytecash out there and getting it used. Or do you view Dexy as kind of one of the first places that you hope to see the mainstream usage of this stablecoin getting traded around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be on Dexy from day one for sure. I think OfferFiles will be using Bytecash, and yeah, we've spoken to the guys actually at Dexy, so I think there's going to be a dedicated market segment for Bytecash as well. So, you know, all the pairs trading against Bytecash will be listed there and easily accessible. Yeah, and then we just have to see what the market does. I mean, I don't think we've got sort of a particular sort of, you know, we just, you know, it's there for people to use and people can use it any way they like. So I don't think we've got a sort of, you know, agenda or roadmap that we want to achieve this or that in terms of adoption here or there. I mean, people are free to use it any way they like, and we just, you know, we just try to make it easier in places where people would like to see it. But I think we're, you know, we're just going to be responding to what the market wants, really.
And could you speak to the governance aspect of it? Was that copied from Maker DAO, or were you looking, you know, for the longevity of the coin in incorporating the governance on the selection of the I believe that it's just the selection of the XCH dollar prices, but was that taken just from Maker DAO? Did you guys bring that to it, and how did you decide on the aspects of governance?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things where we are actually different to a lot of other DeFi protocols is that governance is completely done on chain, right? So there's really everything from proposing a vote to voting it and then to actually implementing it in the code. All that happens completely on chain, right? So there is no legal entity behind it, right? Because a lot of the DAOs that exist elsewhere in crypto are actually legal entities, and token holders can actually be overruled by a board of directors that sits somewhere in the Cayman Islands, right? So, you know, you might not be aware of that, but that's how most DeFi protocols actually work in practice. And I think we've, you know, high-profile kind of examples where that happened is Uniswap, for example, where token holders have been trying to activate the fee switch, but that's repeatedly been sort of put off and you know, overruled essentially by whoever controls the DAO, ultimately this entity, and that's not token holders. There's an extra layer of directors that get to make decisions. So we're not doing that with Circuit. Everything is happening on chain. So I think that makes it a lot more transparent and a lot more fair as well. So it's kind of what you see is what you get. Yeah, so that is the technical documentation. I think in the user guide further up, it's a bit more sort of high level in terms of, yeah. So yeah, this little timeline there is actually quite helpful. So that tells you what the governance process looks like, right? So anyone can propose, can make a proposal. So we call that a bill. Which is basically, you know, you commit on chain to what you want to change in the protocol, which is typically one of these statutes in the statute coin. You put that in a governance coin. So you take CRT tokens, you kind of carry in this bill, and then there's going to be a veto period, right? So you commit this proposal on chain, and then everyone's got a chance to basically to veto it for a certain amount of time. And you know, if it gets vetoed, then obviously the proposal isn't going to pass. The whole thing sort of starts over. But if the veto period passes without a veto, then an implementation delay needs to pass. And that's basically designed to give protocol users sufficient time to make adjustments in response to that change in the protocol, right? So, for example, if you're a borrower and the liquidation ratio gets changed, right, you might not be comfortable anymore with sort of the amount of collateral or the size of your loan if you know that a new liquidation ratio is going to come in. So the implementation delay is basically designed to give people time to adjust their positions, or you know, either top up collateral or pay back their loans and say, look, I'm not comfortable with this anymore. And only after that can the bill be enacted, i.e. the actual statutes parameters get changed on chain and become effective from that date onwards.
Yeah, I like that you also move it from the bill proposal to a veto period instead of the converse in, you know, an adoption vote. So and did you you say that Maker DAO does not have such a governance process? Is it are the oracles selected by a board of directors for it?
Good question. So the oracle is actually, yeah, Seb. I think Seb has.
They will have sort of a governance vote where the governance will have this thing called executive vote, and on chain there will be a decision, but somebody like a developer needs to take that and actually implement it. So, which is part of the company or whatever, and that sort of, there's this kind of a human equation there where, you know, somebody actually needs to do it, and somebody has actually control over the code deployment. They will sort of deploy a new contract. But I mean, while it's clear, while it's sort of visible on the chain, they don't necessarily have to do it. Nothing is forcing them really to do it. So that's sort of how a lot of these protocols work. They use blockchain more for provenance and proof versus actual enforcement.
I see. Well, I call Chia the chain of decentralization maxis. So you guys have put a lot of thought into making the stablecoin elastic and well designed to last. So I commend you for that. We're almost to the top of the hour. Grant, I don't have I don't have any other questions, guys. I don't know if y'all want to.
Yeah, maybe just to close it out, what should we be watching for? Obviously, we'll follow closely on the X account, so we've got that listed in the title. We'll all be keeping a close eye there. You said the security audit's coming up in January, and then we're looking for a Q1 mainnet launch. Is that sort of the right timeline everybody should be keeping firmly in their mind as far as next steps for Circuit?
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing we actually want to do is an audit competition as well. I think we've got lots of talented Chia list developers in the community. So I think we do want to run a small competition for them as well. If they come across any bugs within the protocol, that there's sort of a proper process around that to and a way to actually win some prizes as well.
Yeah, I'm reminded of what happened with the launch of the first AMM on Chia, and that there was a bug that was found. So definitely, there's a lot of talented people out there. So if you're thinking about Circuit and you want to help, we'll be watching for the contest to say find a bug in Circuit and win a prize.
Yeah, and so that's going to be happening after the security audit. So that's first. So expect that to be some point in February or early March.
Okay. Any other parting thoughts on what last things, or otherwise? Yeah, we'll call it good there if there isn't anything else.
Nothing
Okay, guys.
side,
Well, thanks for coming on. We'll definitely catch you guys maybe sometime in February near the launch when you start to do the Circuit and proverbially start doing the rounds and telling everybody what's happening with the launch. But I'd love to have you back again when you get closer to getting this thing live, and we're watching it very closely and love what you're doing. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for inviting us. It's a great chat. And cool.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.